Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Best Practices for Ceramic, Tile and Stone, Efflorescence, and Latex Migration. There's some brief housekeeping before we start. Your phones are on mute. If you have any questions, please type them into the question and answer box in the corner of your screen, and we'll answer them at the end of our session, time permitting, or we'll answer them via email after. And you can always send questions to mapeidigital@mapei.com. Now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Nick Valenti. Nick is the Business Development Manager for MAPEI's UltraCare line of stone, tile, and grout care solutions. He's been involved in the floor care and maintenance industry for more than 35 years, including 26 years as the owner of a company that manufactured floor care and maintenance products. While his experience includes an in-depth knowledge of these products, Nick also understands the major issues and problems that can arise with the surfaces to be protected, and he has solutions for these challenges. In charge of training MAPEI's sales and technical service teams, Nick is even more importantly the in-the-field resource for MAPEI's customers and end users. Without any more delays now, Nick, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jen. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for attending. This is a great topic. I get a lot of interest and a lot of questions about this throughout the working day, and about efflorescence, and also about latex leaching and migration through tile and grout. So put a presentation together for us today to kind of give us an overview of what we're up against with these two phenomenons and where they come from, and how to deal with them. There are two separate different issues of latex migration or leaching and efflorescence, two different approaches of where they're from, what they are, and how to take care of them. So let's get started. Care and maintenance solutions for these products is going to come out of the UltraCare line, which will help us to further understand what's going to happen down the road when we run into these issues. So one of the first things you're going to want to do is repair what we come up against. And then we're going to want to restore, protect, and maintain the product. And that's pretty much the order that you want to do: repair, restore, protect, and maintain. So which one is it? I mean, how do you know the difference? They look a lot alike, but really they are two completely different phenomenons, and one doesn't necessarily get repaired the same as the other. So two different phenomenons, two different ways of approaching it. According to definition, efflorescence is the migration of soluble salts to the surface of porous material like concrete or brick. The French translation means to flower out, and that's why they'll often call it a bloom, efflorescence bloom. And you can see from the photos that you'll see it actually pick up through the joint in actual measured amounts. You'll see it come up through the grout like that, not just the film on the grout, but an actual bloom of salt on the surface. Portland cement-based setting materials and grouts are usually one of the first problem areas because of the Portland cement, and many natural stones and clay contain free lime or soluble salts in them. And when water is brought into the situation, they're brought to the surface by capillary action, and when the water is evaporated, that's when you start to see the salts. They dry to a white salt. And technically, although it is clogging the surface pores of the grout or the stone, and can cause something like spalling or delamination of the stone off the surface or grout, it's considered basically a cosmetic or an aesthetic issue. Regardless, it's an issue that needs to be confronted and taken care of. The causes, according to the Portland Cement Association, it takes three different types of circumstances to cause efflorescence, and there's an asterisk on that. And one of them is, the first one is, there has to be soluble compounds, minerals, or free salts in the masonry or the joining materials, the stone itself. So there has to be minerals. There has to be moisture available to wick it through capillary action to the top to bring it up through evaporation from wherever the sources are coming from. Moisture is the driving issue. That's what brings it to the top. And once you get the evaporation, that causes it to move and bringing the moisture and the minerals up at the same time. Now it says if any of these issues, 1, 2, or 3, is eliminated out of the equation, efflorescence will not occur. So you have to have all 3. The reason there's an asterisk on circumstances is because a 4th circumstance can also contribute, and that is cool, sustained temperatures. I say below 50, but it actually starts getting into the 40s. And that's why you'll see, especially like in Florida, you'll see an uptick in efflorescence claims or calls or inquiries during the cooler months. So really it takes 4 things, but all it takes is 3, but that 4th one is a kicker almost every time. You can drive by a wall down the street, let's say a red brick wall, and it'll all be fine. And then one day you'll see a white line running through it or a white wave running through it. And it just so happens to be during the fall when temperatures have dropped from the 70s and 80s down to the 40s and 50s, you'll see efflorescence all of a sudden occur. And that can be a triggering point. So 3 items definitely needed to cause it. That's the minerals, the moisture, and evaporation. Or a 4th one, temperature, can actually cause it to trigger as well. The main cause is usually water, soluble salts, and cement-based setting materials or grouting materials, subsurfaces brought to the surface by capillary action where the water is present. Contaminated water or sand containing soluble salts can also be a problem. I would not recommend mixing your grout with salt water. That would be a problem. Water penetrating a soluble salt contaminated grout joint, setting bed or cementitious substrate, and then wicking to the surface. That's how it gets there. The common denominator is water. More water than necessary in a setting or grout mixture, excessive water or soaking during the cleanup, adding just way too much water. All these things contribute to it. Again, adding water to the grout to prolong the life or retemping the grout with water as you're mixing it. None of these are recommended recommendations. They're not really to be followed that way. You don't ever add water to grout. You might get away with it on thin set or mud beds and things like that, but to do it on grout is definitely going to cause an efflorescence issue. Mineral content in like well water that's untreated. People ask all the time, can you use well water to mix grout? And the answer is yes. If the water's been treated correctly and is considered what's called potable water, and if the water is coming out of the ground and filtered and treated correctly, there's no reason well water can't be used in a grout mixture. City water comes from wells. So it does, all of it comes from wells. And then the water is treated and processed. So yes, well water can be used. It just can't be untreated well water, especially if you've got water that smells like rotten eggs. You've got a lot of iron in it, and that's caused a lot of iron sulfate, and it's causing it to have that rotten egg smell. That water would definitely not be good. We've all heard the stories of people using bottled water in grout. Yes, absolutely, that is okay. But again, too much of it is going to cause a problem. Using polyethylene plastic sheet on top of the tile afterwards to protect it instead of craft paper can cause and can trap water and cause improper curing of the grout. Can also lead to efflorescence. So if that grout is covered a little bit too fast while it's still trying to evaporate moisture, using polyethylene plastic sheet or craft paper can also cause a problem to lock moisture in, retard the evaporation rate of the water in the grout, and mess up the chemistry and cause some issues as far as turning white with efflorescence. There are a couple different types of efflorescence. One is primary, the other is secondary, 2 different causes. Primary efflorescence occurs during the initial curing phase of the cement-based materials and items like brick. moisture from within the construction, from, say, for instance, moisture in the setting materials, a pipe leak, poor flashing installations, or from external sources like rain, sprinklers, or flooding moving through the system can bring salts to the surface in a variety of ways. And again, you can see how heavy this stuff can actually build up on the surface of grout and tile. The other type is called secondary, and it's nothing that's from the initial setting or the water or anything like that. And this can come down the road. And what it comes from is water intrusion, not so much water intrusion, but invasive materials such as chlorides. And the example here that I'm showing is actually bridge, underneath a bridge. And a steel reinforced bridge or parking garage is a very good example of where a secondary efflorescence can occur. And in these pictures, you see, like, this is something, I think these pictures were taken on a job in, actually, I think it was Vermont. And what happens is they were using the salt solutions on the street to dissolve the snow. Those chlorides in the salt get into the concrete mix and cause problems. They start reacting with a variety of materials in the stone, in the brick, in the concrete structure. It could even be rebar inside, causing it to rust and causing even further issues. But as it begins to form the efflorescence, you can actually see stalactites start to form, little drips of it starting to form on themselves over time. That's a telltale sign of efflorescence intrusion, and it's starting to migrate out of the surface. And, you know, this can cause a degradation of the integrity of the strength of these bridges and columns and things of this nature, parking garages, which is vital that this be maintained properly, because if it's not, it becomes a big time safety concern of collapse and failure and things of that nature. We are accustomed to a white deposit like you've been seeing, but there are other types of efflorescence, and they can manifest in a variety of colors, like yellow, greenish type of colors can be what's called vanadium. It's a mineral, and when it effloresces, it comes out in the form of a green or a yellowish kind of a powder. Brown are also seen from alkaline solutions, high in hydroxides and carbonates, that can cause the colors to come out different. Rust inside of marble is also a type of efflorescence. White marble, like Carrara, has an iron content to it. Most white marble has an iron content. And what happens is when it gets around moisture, it'll begin to turn yellow. And that's water coming in touch with the mineral iron, causing it to rust inside the stone, which makes it get a yellow hue. And if left unattended and the moisture is still persistent, it'll go from yellow to brown to red. It's turning to rust. It's a phenomenon that's quite common with white marble, and it is a type of efflorescence. It's minerals being affected by water being brought to the top, discoloring on the way. So there are several other types of efflorescence, but in our business, generally, probably say 90% of the time, it is a white salt that you're looking at to identify it as an efflorescence. How to remove it? Most of it should be removed mechanically. Like you see some of those photos with that bloom sitting up high like that. That's a powder at this point. It's a crystal powder. It can literally be brushed off the surface. So mechanically removing with a stiff nylon brush or with minimal amount of water. You don't need to use a lot of water, but mechanically remove what you can. And of course, being careful not to scratch the surface of the tile or the stone. So you'd have to use a brush that is appropriate to be able to use in that type of a situation. Sulfamic acid crystals, guys, are really the go-to product in this situation. It is a great acid for removing efflorescence. And it also removes things like rust stains, other mineral deposits as well, hard water and things like that. Removes cement, grout, haze, and mortar residues. You dissolve the crystals in water. 1 pound container does about 1.5 gallons to 2 gallons of water at about a 12% active acid at that point when you dissolve all the crystals. And it's safe for all ceramic and porcelain tile and any of the acid-resistant natural stones, such as like granite and most of the slates. Any of the acids can't be used on things like marble. So if you got efflorescence on marble, there certainly could be a challenge as far as that goes. The sulfamic acid is a very good product for removing efflorescence off the surface of tile, stone, and grout. $1 million question: how to prevent it? Keep it from getting wet. The amount of water or the additives specifically recommended by the manufacturer is very important. When the bag says add 5 quarts of water to 50 pounds, you add 5 quarts of water to 50 pounds, not 4, not 6, 5. And that's the importance of the measurement. We balance these products to be made in specific ways, and to mix it on the site, anything other than what's recommended by the manufacturer is a little bit out of the norm. So I would highly recommend that you follow the instructions from the manufacturer as to the measured amount going in. Keep the installation above the minimum temps recommended by the manufacturer on the bag. If it says can't be used under 40 degrees, I would say don't do it under 40 degrees. Install grout as firm as possible but pliable. In other words, dry but wet. You guys can imagine that. Dry but wet. The people that have been in the business understand it. There is a delicate balance between firm and not. So it should be, if it's mixed according to the instructions for the right amount of time with the right amount of water, you should have that type of a grout mixture at the when you're ready to apply. Always allow for the proper curing time of the grout. Again, covering it too quickly with craft paper or polyethylene sheeting can not allow for that water to evaporate. It'll evaporate, but it gets stuck up underneath that plastic sheet as condensation, keeping it too wet underneath in that environment that you've actually caused. And now it's going to have a problem on the curing of the grout, causing an issue. So always allow for the proper curing time before you subject it to any type of covering or things of that nature. And when you go to clean up, more is not better. Use the minimal amount of water, wring that sponge out, wipe it across, flip the sponge, do it again, wet the sponge, wring it out. Use minimal amounts of water. There's no reason to be flooding a floor with water for a cleanup. Craft paper or breathable paper is better to use instead of polyethylene plastic sheeting, because these products are breathable. Plastic holds in the moisture like we talked about, which will cause efflorescence if you're not careful. When you got high moisture content, doing moisture tests and moisture drive tests on the surface is probably the best thing to do. And then you have to revert to moisture mitigation type membranes when you have excessive moisture or moisture that exceeds the allowable rate for the application of any of these products. In today's technology, there are a variety of grouts and mortars that can be used to reduce the possibility of efflorescence. Some of the new calcium aluminate type grouts are considered efflorescence-free grouts. Our UltraColor Plus FA would be a perfect example of that. Another example would be the Flex Color CQ being moisture-free, no water added. And, of course, epoxy grouts, 0 water. So those types of grouts help reduce it. Standard cement-based, Portland cement-based grouts always have a tendency to, or have the ability, I should say, to effloresce under the conditions that we've been talking about. Preventing efflorescence, once you've gotten it removed by dry scrubbing and rinsing with sulfamic acid, washing the floor, and letting it dry, and everything looks great. Now we need to protect it properly. If we're dealing on grout or porous stone, the two go-to sealers that I would recommend would be our Penetrating Plus water-based for the more porous surfaces, and the Penetrating SB for the more dense surfaces. It's a solvent-based product, and it's made to get into dense surfaces. If it was a dense stone with FA grout and it effloresced, we got it off the tile, got it off the stone because of the density of the grout and possibly the density of the stone, be it a granite or something like that. I would tell you use the SB in that situation so it gets into those dense surfaces easier than a water base like our Penetrating Plus. What these sealers do is they are considered what's called breathable or vapor permeable. And that little blue picture here in the middle of the screen shows you, in a crude way, but it's effective. All these minerals down here, once it's sealed, and there's your seal line right there, it allows the moisture to come out, but it really greatly reduces the amount of minerals that are allowed through that matrix, and that's how the sealer works. So when it gets into the subsurface, down into the stone or grout, it forms a barrier that is breathable, allows 100% of the water to transmit out in the form of vapor. The water turns to vapor, allows it to come out. But it's too tight of a matrix to allow the minerals to come out with it. So these two sealers are literally efflorescence control type products. And I will tell you, they will give you about a 95% chance of not letting it come through again. However, I'm going to give Mother Nature a very strong 5%, because if she wants it to happen, there's nothing me, you, or sealer is going to do to stop it from happening. A lot of times people like to take the approach when efflorescence occurs. My first question is, how long ago did it start when I get the call? And if they say, oh, it just happened, then I ask a little bit more. How long ago did you finish the installation? Well, we just did it a week ago, and now it's efflorescing. I would tell them, slow down. Don't pump the brakes here. Don't do anything yet. I know it's unsightly, but leave it alone. It just started. Let it keep going. So you want it to come out. It'll eventually stop, but that eventual time frame could be 2 weeks, 2 months, a year. It could be longer, depending on the conditions, the environment, and the whole thing matters. So let it run its course. Sometimes it's better to let it run, because if you attack it, scrub it, clean it, remove it, and seal it, and it comes back, that's been a lot of work for a lot of nothing. Let it run its course, then start these measures, pump the brakes, take your time. Once you got it to a clean, dry surface, now let's see if it happens, is it start to come back in a couple of days. If a couple of days go by and everything's okay, now we can start sealing and feel comfortable about making sure it's done the right way. And even though these measures are about 95% correct and effective, until the root cause is determined, what's causing the efflorescence, like an underwater pipe leak or something like that, the efflorescence could definitely recur. Latex migration, although it looks like efflorescence in a lot of ways, and a lot of times it is, it's a combination of both, it can be significantly different. These types of streaks, cascading streaks, is almost sometimes a dead giveaway to latex migration. But it has a different characteristic. It's not as much of a bloom as it is a gooey mixture. This picture here is actually from my own home. This is latex coming up through the setting material and the grout, which was flex color, and it's only in 2 small little areas of my living room, which is a sunken living room, and it's the lowest part of the house. I live on a lake, so it's a very high water table right up underneath us, and that's out of 1,600 square feet of Marazzi plank tile. I have 2 areas about the size of an inch, about this. Well, you see how big it is. Maybe 3 areas, and they're all within the same 5-foot perimeter. They're all in that same little spot. And I took this picture quite a while ago, probably 2 years ago, and that's actually, you can see it. This is not water. That's actually latex coming up through the film. What is it? What is latex migration? Those 2 photos just won't go away, will they? It's a lot less common than efflorescence. It's not nearly as common. It only happens a lot more rare situations, but it does happen, and it is difficult to deal with. It is definitely more of a problem to deal with than efflorescence by itself. Most of the time, it appears like a white residue, especially with polymer modified grouts, and especially if there's a lot of water around before the polymers can actually coalesce and cure and bind together properly. When it does migrate and manifest on the surface, it can be a sticky, gooey material, and the latex, sometimes the dead giveaway is a vinegar-type smell to it. Part of the latex building properties of the latex itself has got a glacial acetic acid type of a smell, which is a vinegar. a little bit of a sour smell to it. And a lot of times, like the picture on the left, the white stuff, there's no real smell at all. The picture on the right with the clear material, that actually does have a vinegar smell to it. I did stick my finger in it, and yes, I did smell it. So it does definitely had a vinegar smell to it. Sometimes the latex can be mixed with the efflorescence, making it come out together. And if that is the situation, it makes it harder to identify, and which makes it a little bit more of a challenge to remove, because now we got latex and minerals, and what might work on one doesn't necessarily work on the other. So it becomes a little bit more of a challenge to remove. Common causes: polymer in the thin set or grout that's not thoroughly cured because it was a little bit of rushing going on in the situation. Water leaks, broken pipes, bad flashing. Rain coming in immediately before or shortly after grouting is another issue. Sprinklers coming on exterior applications can be an issue. Areas that have poor drainage. Real quick story, guys. I was at a house here in Florida, in Tampa, on Davis Island, very high end, owned by one of the New York Mets, and it was it's on the market right now for $29 million. If anybody knows anybody that wants to buy it, it's totally out of my price range. Anyway, the new quarterback for the Tampa Bay Bucks is living there right now, but I got called out to this job about 3 years ago. There is one 6-inch drain in the middle of 4,000 square feet of Indiana limestone. The floor was pitched to the house, not away. They live on Tampa Bay, overlooking the water. There's a saltwater pool with saltwater fountains on a saltwater bay, and they have an efflorescence problem. That was the worst draining I've ever seen. The politics of why it's there are completely different, but it is the main cause of what that problem was. Completely poor drainage. As a matter of fact, I would call it no drainage. There were pools of water sitting on the stone, and they were asking why they had an efflorescence issue. Again, improper installation of roof flashing can cause leaking behind the walls, meaning you got some kind of an issue going on. When it comes to polymer additives, there are a variety of them to be used in cement-based grouts and setting materials, and every one of them can offer a different characteristic. And some of them add improved chemical resistance, flexibility, higher bond strength, and a more dense grout, for instance, making reduced porosity. Some of the additives are in powders that are actually ground into the mixture during the manufacturing of the product, and they're activated when you add water. Others are additives like liquids like our Grout Max. You add that instead of water. Those are all polymers being added to the grout that can contribute to latex migration. Removing it basically requires identifying it to make sure that you're on the right track here. Once it's leached to the surface, sometimes it can require using solvents or strong alkali type liquids like our heavy duty stone tile and grout cleaner. Vigorous scrubbing, finding the right product or the combination is really what you're trying to do. That's what we're trying to accomplish. Testing is usually done. It takes a couple of different applications sometimes to get it right, or even a combination to get it right. For the heavier, in the UltraCare line, for the heavier residues, instead of strong solvents like lacquer thinner and stuff like that, I'd recommend the heavy-duty sealer and coating stripper. It will work to dissolve latex. It will remove acrylics. It'll remove urethane. It'll remove things like Flex Color CQ Haze. It'll remove our high gloss and low sheen coatings. So this product is a much safer, albeit a slower approach. It is a safe approach, and it works quite well. So if you've got heavy latex migration, I would tell you hit it with the stripper first, let it sit there, and the dwell time could be 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. It would depend on how much is on the stone or grout and how much needs to be removed, and how old it is will dictate how long the heavy duty needs to sit. For the lighter medium residues, I would say our heavy-duty stone tile and grout cleaner and alkaline cleaner would work quite well. The alkalinity, and there is a solvent in that is a glycol ether type of a solvent that helps dissolve latexes as well. It attaches to acrylic. It attacks acrylic and latex, so that helps, and it will remove light films of latex haze quite easily. The abrasive surface cleaner can also be incorporated on by itself or in conjunction with the heavy duty cleaner. It works quite well. So you would apply the cleaner first, let it sit for 5 minutes, and then apply an equal amount of abrasive cleaner on top and hit it with a scrub pad. The abrasive cleaner doesn't need to sit. It works by abrasion. I would not mix the two together in a bucket and then use it. It will separate the two out. The abrasive cleaner will separate and drop to the bottom. But if you do the heavy duty cleaner first, maybe 1-to-1 with water or undiluted, let it sit for a few minutes and then add the abrasive right on top and then scrub. It gives you that abrasive along with the alkalinity, so you get that kind of a 1-2 punch. I do know people that actually use it with the heavy duty sealer and coating stripper in very much the same way. They apply the stripper, let it sit. Before they scrub, they add the abrasive and scrub with the two of them together at the same time. And it is quite effective in removing latex migration. To go through the product, the best way to remove the heavier, light to medium, I should say, is start by mechanically removing the visible stuff that we talked about with a scrub pad or a nylon brush. Be sure not to scratch the surface. You can go with a stiff bristle brush, just make sure it's not metal and make sure the surface can handle it. In today's world, about 90% of the applications out there are installations of porcelain tile, so it should be able to take a nylon bristle brush quite easily. Pressure wash of the large areas outside is possible. Again, there's going to be water being used, but if you have a two-man operation, pressure washing and squeegeeing off the excess is a pretty good combination. Works quite well. The heavy duty, again, you would apply the heavy duty first and then use the abrasive on top to give you that additional abrasive quality with the alkalinity of the heavy duty cleaner. You're going to let it sit for 10, 20 minutes, depending. I've never seen it take longer than 20 to actually work. You can add a little bit of water by using a spray bottle and mist it to keep it wet if you need to. And then you add the equal amount of abrasive in the top, like I was mentioning, and then you scrub it, and you should get a pretty good result. If you get a 50% result, do it again. So it may take more than one scrubbing to do it the right way. Once you rinse with the clean water, I like personally to use wet vacs. I like to suck the water up and off of the floor, and it sucks it up and out of the joint instead of smearing it across the surface of the joint, making it appear clean. But when it dries, you get this misty haze on the grout joint again. What you've done is just kind of spread the contaminants around, and they settle back onto the joint. By using a wet vac, you suck up and out of the grout joint those contaminants, and you have a lot less of that water laying around to cause an additional problem. I like to dry the areas with towels once I work. There's, if you've got 10,000 feet, I treat it the same way as I would do 1,000 feet, just one bite at a time. Once you rinse an area clean, I use a towel and dry it. I don't like an abundance of water just sitting around, potentially to add more problems. Putting minerals back on the surface, letting it dry with water spots or something to that effect. I try to remove the water off the floor, make sure that we don't have any other issues. And repeat. It's not going to hurt anything. Like I said, if you got 50% results the first time, do it again. But if you reach a point where you're not getting any better, there's, what's the definition of insanity? You keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result. If you tried it twice and you can only get to a certain stage, you might have to switch gears. So keep that in mind. The two products that we recommend the most are going to be the heavy duty cleaner and the abrasive surface cleaner. They can be used in combination, like I've been saying. They work quite well. Again, wet vac it up, keeps that material from settling on the floor. When you go into heavy latex migration, I like to use our heavy duty stripper. Again, start by mechanically removing, and then apply the sealer and coating stripper. You don't want to paint it on pretty. It's a creamy, thick liquid, quite viscous. So you want to shake it up well, pour it into an area, and spread it uniformly. This is one place where a heavy nap roller would work quite well to apply it, because you don't want to put it on pretty, you just want to put it on abundantly so it doesn't dry quickly. And it's not a fast drying product. Let's let it stand for 10 to 20 and keep it wet. You can either add more stripper to keep it wet, or just mist it with clean water in a spray bottle, and that'll keep it wet. I've never seen the product dry on the floor. I've left it sitting on a table on the porch, not in direct exposure, but under cover outside on a porch. And I just poured it on there, and it was wet for days. So it's not a quick drying product at all. It's not made to dry that quickly. But if you're working in an environment where you maybe have crosswind coming across the floor, causing things to dry fast, you can keep it wet by adding stripper or pouring spraying water. Again, hit it hard with the scrub pad or a brush, and rinse with the clean water. Use the wet vac, and dry with the clean towel. Repeat if needed. So both of these are good methods to remove latex migration. The heavy-duty sealer and coating stripper, very safe, easy to use, great technology. The product itself is a professional strength product. I've seen it do crazy good stuff to help people out of jams. It does remove the latex residue. Other types of coatings I mentioned are high gloss, low sheen. It'll take both of those off. The odor is actually very pleasant. It's citrus oil. Delaminine is one of the ingredients, and that's pure essence of oil from citrus directly right out of the rind. And that's what gives it that very, very pleasant citrus odor, an orange smell. Easy to use, water-based formula, non-hazardous. Works on ceramic, porcelain, all with the grouts, natural stone surfaces. It will not harm marble. It doesn't have an acid pH, so it could actually be used on polished marble. Won't hurt anything. This is directly from the NTCA Reference Manual. I should have probably put the pages on there for you to reference, but it is in the NTCA Reference Manual, the one that I have, the most recent one, 2018-2019. Use only the additives recommended by the grout or mortar manufacturer. Crossing fences is not a great idea. I used to get solicited all the time when I ran a manufacturing company, when I owned a chemical manufacturing company. People would ask me, hey man, you make great products. Why don't you make an additive for grout? And my question to them was, hey, it's a great thing, and I can make a good one. However, why would you want to use Nick's grout modifier with MAPEI's grout? Or Nick's product with Latex or Bonzo or anybody who made a cementitious product? Why would you use my product? Because if something went sideways, who's pointing the finger at who at that point? I would say stay within the fence, stay within the recommended manufacturers or the manufacturer that you're using, stay within their product line. Use the mixer correctly, 300 RPM or less. Using a high-speed mixer can put air into the system and cause a significant amount of problems. The mixture should be stiff with a zero slump, meaning that if you stood it up on itself, it shouldn't fall. Swimming pools, gang showers, steam rooms, got to allow the installation to cure 14 to 60 days, depending on the temperature, humidity, exposure, the environment of the job. This is straight out of the NTCA manual. Protect it from weather extremes, freezing, rain. During the initial curing period, it's most important to let that thing set up and become what it's supposed to be as quickly as possible. Allow 48 hours is what they tell you on an installation to allow all the water to come out of the setting materials and out through the uninhibited grout joints before you start grouting. You got to consider the conditions, imminent rain, the size of the tile, where you're at. It could be very high altitudes, meaning things may dry funny under certain conditions. So take all that into consideration. Flashing at the roofs and windows, these could be areas of concern on vertical applications where water can get behind the tile, have no escape route out except through evaporation, causing latex to get pushed out through the surface because it never had a chance to cure properly before water was able to get behind the system because of a poorly or incorrectly installed flashing. Can cause a lot of issues like that. when you're going to put the floor in, the expansion joints are going to be what's really important to make sure that you have the right amount of expansion. Perimeter joints also to have the right amount of expansion. And latex you caulk your perimeter instead of grouting the perimeter. All of these things will help keep water out of the system. And if you can caulk, it's good to do it as quickly as you can after the grout is cured enough for you to walk on. So get on it as quickly as possible and do your caulking as quickly as possible, and that will help the situation. I'm done, guys, and you guys listen very quickly. I know I talk very quickly, but I appreciate your patience, and I appreciate your attendance. And any questions, I'll be happy to assist.
We actually do have a question. If we're required to cover the floors with craft paper, how long should we wait after grouting?
I'd probably give it at least 24 hours, give it 1 day to let it start setting up. I think they will even go as far as 48 hours on some labels will tell you to wait 24 to 48 before you actually cover the floor. Covering it the day you grout is not a good idea. I would give it at least a day of cure time to let that grout reach its potential as quickly as possible, and then covering it with craft paper should be okay. That would be on a standard, say 3/8 inch joint or even smaller, where water can come out relatively quickly. But I would wait at least 24 hours before you put the craft paper down.
Okay, here's another question. You said caulk the flashing, etc. You mean use 100% silicone, correct?
Yes, silicone caulk. Our Care caulk is actually good to use as well. But yes, the silicone caulk is what would work the best, and that keeps water out the best. Latex can actually water can actually affect latexes over time. Silicones reject water quite well.
Great. One more. Can efflorescence lay dormant and then manifest later?
Yes, that's the secondary efflorescence that we were discussing earlier. That means that it will sit undetected, then all of a sudden something will trigger it, like cold temperatures all of a sudden drop. And say, for instance, it rained because a front came through, rained, wet that brick wall, and then all of a sudden it got cool, it got cold, the temperature dropped, and there's moisture, there's minerals, and there's cold temperatures, and efflorescence kicked in. That's that secondary stage of efflorescence that we were talking about. The primary being at the onset of the installation is when the efflorescence occurred within a day or a few days or a week or so. That's a standard primary efflorescence. The secondary efflorescence can occur after the product has been sitting there dormant for, could be even be years. And that's happened before. People will say, I've never had this problem. Now all of a sudden it's a problem. It's the combination, it's the perfect storm, so to speak, that everything came together causing the efflorescence to manifest. You have to understand, on efflorescence, if you have a standard residential home on concrete slab, that slab has, and in today's standards, you have a vapor barrier underneath. You should have a vapor barrier underneath the floor. It has to have it to pass inspection. The older homes, and this happens quite frequently in the 70s and stuff around the 70s, never knew if a vapor barrier was used. So some homes can be plagued with efflorescence forever because the moisture under the home is always present, never having a chance to completely cure out. And there's nothing to stop it from coming through the foundation, which has minerals. Now you put a mud bed on top of it, one of our mortars, or anybody's mortar to set tile, more minerals. Then you put a natural stone on top of it, like limestone, more minerals. And then you grout it with cement-based grout, more minerals. So everything in the system has minerals. So the potential for efflorescence, primary and secondary, is very, very probable in that situation. You have an abundance of minerals, and unless you're in there with minimal moistures and all the planets have aligned, there's a possibility that efflorescence could occur down the road. So yes, it can lay dormant and come out later. Absolutely.
And okay, more questions are coming in. I thought low sheen and high gloss was a permanent application. HD stripper works on these two finishes. Please confirm.
Yes, absolutely. There's nothing permanent about a sealer, whether it be a penetrating or topical. There's no permanence to any of those products. They are temporary at best. They will all lose their effectiveness. Whenever you're dealing with topical products like high gloss and low sheen, they have a wearable surface now, and they've actually become the walking surface. That tile is no longer what's being touched. Your foot and heel and shoe are hitting the sealer. So wear patterns will develop, and if you don't maintain them correctly by reapplying the material to establish a wear off, replace, or I should say wear down, replace, you don't ever want it to get to the point of wearing through to bare tile, because when you do that, then you have to strip it, and that could be a problem. And that's where the heavy duty sealer and coating stripper would come in, where you have to remove the high gloss or the low sheen coatings off of a surface. The heavy duty stripper will take them both off, but they are not permanent treatments. They are aesthetic, and they are there to protect tile and stone in a different way. And they do change the look. They produce a sheen. But if something, say for instance, you applied 2 coats and then you applied the 3rd coat, and your dog had come through from outside, shook dog hair on the floor, you didn't realize it, but then after you applied the sealer, you saw it dried in the floor, and you got to strip it off. That would be a worst case scenario, but that's where the heavy duty sealer and coating stripper would do quite well to remove those coats of sealer off the tile.
Gotcha. Okay, after how many days of applying grout can we apply the sealer? And they're asking specifically about a silane siloxane sealer.
Okay, silane siloxanes are quite good. They both have benefit. Each company is going to be a little bit different. In MAPEI's grouts, I think on the porous grouts that they're talking about, I believe they say wait 48 hours before applying anything like a sealer to it. Maybe as much as 72. And I apologize for not being 100% accurate, but the bag of grout will tell you how long it needs to cure before you apply anything or use any cleaners on it. So I would tell you at least 48 hours. If you're doing a particular stone job, for instance, and you see the grout after 2 days is a little mottled, meaning light and dark, but not white, just light and dark. And the darker areas tend to be under the shade or up against areas where water can evaporate. That's telling you there's still moisture in the floor. Give it another day and see if it diminishes. So 2 days may not be enough. It may take 3 or maybe even a little longer. But for most porcelain or ceramic installations where a 3/8 inch joint or less is used, that grout's ready to seal within a couple of days. So I think 48 would probably be the minimum wait time. And that'll give it time to kick, cure, and reach its almost full integrity before you come back and seal on top of it.
Great. Okay. Will the heavy duty stripper work on enhancers also?
No, not our enhancer. Once our enhancer cures, like our Enhancing Plus, once it cures, at 72 hours, straight acetone will not take it off of the tile. It won't diminish the enhancement of this enhancer. So if you got a piece of slate and enhanced it and tried to remove it after 72 hours with straight acetone, you will not be successful. Our heavy duty sealer and coating stripper could probably work if it's left to cure. What you would have to do is not cure, rather to react. And what you would have to do is apply it liberally and then cover it with plastic and let it sit under cover for however long it takes. I'm not going to say it won't work. There's a high probability it won't. But it can be beneficial in some situations. So it's definitely worth a try before you start breaking out the big guns and start going toxic with some of the other things out on the street, like methylene chloride type paint strippers and lacquer thinners and acetone and things of that nature, which are problematic problems in themselves. So if the heavy duty stripper doesn't take off the enhancing sealers, then you're definitely going to have to ratchet it up to something a lot more industrial than our product.
Oh, okay. Which product is the best to use for grout film on the newer, higher ANSI A118.7 grouts? Cement grout haze remover or heavy-duty stone tile and grout remover?
Good question, and it's a trick question. I know who asked that question. So it's all right. Payback is bad. It really is. No. Okay, so it's a great question. NTCA straight up says for cement-based grouts, use an alkali cleaner the first 10 days of grout haze. After 10 days, switch to an acid. They say it straight up in their paper, in their book. I think it's page 276. Says it straight up. Use alkali cleaners on cement-based grout haze the first 10 days of after grouting. If at that point, after 10 days, and you still have grout haze or it hasn't been addressed, then you're going to have to switch to something like sulfamic acid or cement grout haze remover or our acidic tile and grout cleaner, something along those lines.
Okay. A follow-up to the silane sealer question about plaster. How many days to set before applying the silane sealer to protect it?
Plaster?
Yep.
That's a good question. I would definitely refer to the technical data sheet on plaster. There's these siloxane, silane type sealers usually require some type of content, mineral content to react with in order to do what they need to do. Others react with ambient conditions like just being able to be out in the open air. They react with just air temp drying. That's just how they work. Others react with actual chemical reaction with like CO2 in the atmosphere. That's how they react. Each one is a little different. Siloxanes and silanes, in my opinion, are probably a little bit too sophisticated for a plaster type application. Siloxanes and silanes are the smallest molecules we deal with in our industry, silane being the smallest. I call it the Maserati molecule because we are an Italian company, and it's a very small molecule. It can get into really tight places. It's made really for more dense surface applications than something like plaster. But if you have a comfort zone working with siloxane, silane blended products on plaster, I would tell you that follow the manufacturer's guideline on the curing of plaster. You want to make sure that it has reached its max potential, and that I would suspect would be no less than 24 hours after spreading plaster before it actually sets up. To where it's hard enough to take a product like this and be a product like siloxane or silane and be able to protect the plaster the right way. So I would defer to the manufacturer's recommendation on the plaster before it's sealed. But I would tell you, I would think at least 24 hours before you apply the sealer to plaster.
Okay. Here's a question. When you reapply sealers in the wear area, do you exclude non-wear areas?
Good question. If you not necessarily, to answer you in a nutshell. So residential application scenario, the kitchen is going to show the wear on a topical sealer like high gloss or low sheen before anywhere else starts to show, simply because the kitchen is the most popular room in the house. It's going to get the most wear and tear the fastest, and they're going to be quote high contact areas, but with feet, and that's going to be in front of the kitchen sink where you stand and kind of shuffle your feet and wash dishes, and where you open the refrigerator and you grab the gallon of milk and you pivot away and twist your feet right there, and you do that a couple thousand times a month. That's going to be a wear spot there. So they're highly identifiable wear areas. So when you go to apply these topical sealers, what you want to do is you want to make sure the floor has been cleaned and dry. So sweep it or vacuum it, damp mop it or scrub it clean with whatever you need to do to get the grime off, get it to a good, clean, workable surface, and then apply the sealer If you are working with squares on floors in a perfect world where you have 12 by 12s or 12 by 24s on floors, and you can stop at what's considered a common grout joint where the wear pattern is only, say, 3 feet wide in one area, but the surrounding area is all in good shape, stop at that common joint if you can. But if you're dealing with a hexagon with this or that, or octagon with a dot, or a fleur de lis, or all these other crazy patterns that we have, French patterns and all these different layout patterns that we have, it's difficult to do it on a straight grout line. So, and stop at a common joint. So overlapping onto the other areas is quite common. There's no reason to do, because the floor has a wear pattern, to do the whole floor every time. So if you do that, you'll end up with an abundance of sealer in the areas where you don't really traverse or walk, because and so there's no need to be building it up unnecessarily. What the concept of these coatings for maintenance is: wear down, replace, wear down, replace. I don't want to say wear off, because if you wear it off to bare tile, now you got a problem. You got to strip it, and things may never come back the same way. They'll be acceptable, but maybe not. So the most important thing is to reapply on a clean, dry surface and minimize the overlap, but the overlap is going to happen, and it's okay. It's not going to hurt anything, but there's no reason for you to do the whole floor.
All right. Well, there's a few more questions, so we're going to have to address those via email after, because it looks like we have run the clock out.
I'm showing 2 more minutes.
You want to take one more?
I'll take one more. Yeah, give me one more.
Can you talk fast? Okay.
What? Do I need to talk fast? Really? Here, let me take a chill pill.
Okay. All right. Let's see if we can do it. 2 more minutes. Vinegar solution diluted 1 to 6. Can it remove primary efflorescence?
That's an awful weak solution. Vinegar itself is drinkable. It's a pretty weak solution as it is. But for the record, straight white vinegar can etch marble, polished marble, on contact. It doesn't take 1 minute. It doesn't take 5 minutes. It doesn't take 30 minutes. It takes 1 second. With that being said, to remove a 1 to 6 ratio, 1 ounce of cleaner, 1 ounce of vinegar, and 6 ounces of water, for instance, that is an awful weak solution to remove efflorescence. I would say at best that mixture would remove water spots on a polished porcelain floor. And you got a dark porcelain and you got water spots from just water that you just damp up with water, for instance. The water spots dried on the surface. A vinegar wash of that dilution would probably remove it. I would probably even say you might have to go a little stronger, like maybe 1 part vinegar, 4 parts water, probably give you a better clean. But 1 to 6, I just don't have a lot of confidence in it being able to remove efflorescence.
All right, you did it. Thank you. and thank you, everybody, for spending some time with us this afternoon. We appreciate it. This concludes today's webinar, and as I said, we will answer any more questions via email. And if you think of any more, please send them to us at mapeidigital@mapei.com, and we'll be sure to answer them. And I guess we'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.